Yeah, I think they do in a certain extent, and I think it goes back to like just not wanting to open up and be vulnerable. Um, but like I said, I also don't think that a lot of men are given that space to be vulnerable. Um, and so yeah, I do definitely feel like, and it's I know that was something I struggled with growing like in high school. Um, my dad got custody over me and my sister because the situation at my mom's house wasn't too good at the time. Um, And so, moving and not telling any of my friends goodbye. I know I had this interesting thing. I grew up um and moved a lot towards the beginning. It wasn't really, it was only, well, it was a lot for me to like, I think it affected me in a certain sense. So like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and then I moved to a school in third grade, and that's where I stuck. In that district is where I stuck from third to eighth grade first semester, right? So, I used to joke with my friends throughout that time period and be like, when friends would leave or, they would have to move schools, I would joke around and be like, "Hey, I'm moving," right? Which I don't know why. I didn't know why at the time, but I think it was just kind of like I don't know the terminology for it, but I was like, I think subconsciously I was kind of scared of having to do that. And so to be able to joke about it was like, cool. And then when the time came, I didn't say a word to anybody that I was leaving. Because we weren't supposed to leave until to the end of the next semester. So after eighth grade year, then ninth grade, we would go and be with my dad. Because it was half and half usually. Um, my mom would have more time, but then it was kind of half and half or whatever. So I think 4 days with my mom, 3 days with my dad. Um, but yeah, and then situation happened with my sister, and my dad was like, probably best to just move sooner. So we left the first semester of or the second semester of my eighth grade year, and I didn't tell anybody. Um, and I just kind of like it is what it is until the beginning of my sophomore year. Going into my sophomore year, I realized the effect that it had on me, and it was starting to affect me a lot. And I was mourning and grieving that having to leave my friends and having to leave my mom and all that stuff, which the circumstance was the way it was because of her and stuff like that. But I was really close to my mom, and so to have to move and to have to live with my dad, it was just a lot. And so I remember having this really bad, that sophomore year to feel really my sophomore year was just really bad. I was depressed, I was lonely, isolated in myself. I was very different than what I was. Um, and I remember that, I told my dad and what I was going through and that I didn't like school and stuff like that. And, he was just kind of like trying to comfort, but was like, you still got to go to school, stuff like that. Uh, I remember telling my mom that I talked to him, and she kind of, what was interesting is, she was like, God has a plan for your life. And at the time, I wasn't really even thinking or concerned about God at that time. But I remember her saying that and it being like, okay, it is, whatever. But it was cool because she was like, God has something planned for you and something in store for you. And, he loves you and I love you. And, it's going to be okay. Um, but there was nothing they could really do, right? I mean, they were trying to be there for me, but I really isolated myself and I really needed the space to just kind of go over what was going on. But because I was so shy and like emotional, I didn't feel like I could ever get it out. So I would go to different avenues to kind of fill that void, which never filled the void. Um, but yeah, I remember that being pretty important, or that time being very crucial of like, that's when, I think I started thinking more, started pondering things more. And I felt like obviously things turned out, great because, God used that and, has, changed my life, as time has went on and, things are better now. But I do feel like if I were to have had that space to be vulnerable and open about what was going on, not to say that there would be an immediate change, but I think I would just to know that I'm able to express how I feel would be nice. And I feel like I didn't want to be ungrateful for, being in a better circumstance, right? But at the same time, it was just like I just dreaded being at school. I started to dislike my teammates, so I quit football after the season was over. Um, and I just don't feel like there's a lot of spaces, genuine spaces, right? I feel like there's spaces, but that doesn't mean just because someone is given a space to be vulnerable that it's the best thing for them, right? Um, and so I feel like if there was more spaces to where people could be vulnerable and it was actually beneficial and there was genuine love and care that, you know, things would be better in a sense. And, I'm kind of, big on, God and, Jesus being that, being what healed me of that, because even, I got out of that depression after the sophomore year, but there was still that trauma and that hurt. Um, and a lot of stuff I didn't necessarily deal with until I came to Christ, right? But yes, I do feel that there's a lack of care for men's mental stability and what's going on internally.
Yeah, I'd also say that they go rather unseen. Like, you know, I'm online a lot. I've been with my little friend group for a while. And yeah, like Eric was saying, or Eric was doing in his story, a lot of men when they kind of have to bring down the stone wall just immediately crumble. I guess crumbles is a fine word, but like break down, like just the weight of everything hits them at once, and that's especially the reason why a lot of men will typically double down on the stone wall. It's because they know it's going to be it'll be relieving, but it'll be, embarrassing. It'll be, leave them exposed, vulnerable, all that. Yeah, as for avenues for men's mental health, yeah, there's not a whole lot of ways. Like, I remember seeing like a few articles over the years of all those men mental health clinics that just get like protested and shut down and don't get the funding they need. So outside of friends and family, they're usually or uh partners, there's not really a lot of other avenues men would have. And I would also agree with the fact that comedy is the most common kind of deflecting tactic for it, where you kind of share a little bit, but it's under the guise of a joke, so it bothers you less to say